We've got Bradbury, yes, definitely. I Sing the Body Electric, short stories. If you wanted to start reading science fiction, I would say you could easily start with Bradbury. Ray Bradbury again, The Dust Returned. Oh, we've got a nice section here. Fahrenheit 451, the classic tale, where the firemen are no longer employed to fight fires, but are employed to burn books. Right, what else have we got in this section? Ox and Craig. I haven't read that one, I must say. They haven't labelled it, but it is a science fiction book, definitely. A dystopian. Why do people prefer dystopian futures? Bulwer. Bryn, yes, another science fiction writer. His timescale for it is in millions of years. Civilizations are destroyed, and the evidence that they ever existed is destroyed by being subsumed into the Earth's surface with the moving of the plates.
That's great.
Okay. Oh, Ursula Le Guin, or however you pronounce it. It's one of the few early recognised female writers. W's. I can't really see the logic in how books have ended up in the stack. But there we are. Yeah. Oh, there we are, Asimov. I found an Asimov. A classic, and a few more. So we've got The Foundation, this is the series that made Asimov's name. And of course, his robots, his whole series where he posed the ethical questions that we're asking now about AI. And he was doing it in the 70s, 60s and 70s.
I nearly did, the work, the letters of the bookshelves. We thought about Foundation.
Yes.
But then I didn't really want to reference Asimov because he was a self-proclaimed misogynist.
Well, this is being woke, isn't it? We're being aware of what the person was like or history.
Yeah. But isn't it interesting that we might want to benefit from that person's imagination?
Yes.
And maybe that's what disturbs us.
Yes. Yes, you can't always choose what your authors are like in real life. Because I think if you have a type of ego that is prepared to think and develop whole worlds and schemes and civilizations, it possibly is that you're an egotist and not really a nice person. But we have to live with that, I think. Oh, it was Jules Verne. One of the first science fiction books I read. Well, yeah. Yes, and together with 2,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I remember as a child thinking about what it would be like to go under the sea in a submarine like that. So we'll put this one in your basket.
Okay.
Oh, that's the one I was looking at. James Michener. I remember reading that, and that's full of short stories. In my teens, all the major publishers like Gollancz would every year publish a collection of short stories. And those were the easiest to read. As a young teen, you could easily read a book of short stories because you read one story and then stop and carry on. That was my introduction, really, to science fiction, the easy way in, reading short stories. In libraries I have used a lot, especially in my youth. They were a very good way of getting to read science fiction and getting to read the recent science fiction. And in fact, the library van used to come round and it used to bring specifically books for me and my brother. Science fiction books. They would always have half a dozen so we could take them out. that was just the librarians being really good to us. Then charity shops came in, and I could pick up the books very cheaply. 2 shillings, 10 pence, 20 pence. That was the price for a science fiction book. So you could pick up lots of them. You could pick up 5, 6, 7, 8. And it was easier than going to the library. Initially I collected them because I used to swap them with my twin brother. I used to buy some books, and then when I visited him, I would give him those books and take some of his books. And it sort of crept on from there. Keep them on a bookcase because the better ones you can reread, definitely. In the 70s, we were in Jamaica, and there wasn't a lot to do in the evening, so you could buy books. I could buy the American books in Jamaica, the American science fiction books, which you couldn't get in Britain. So some of those are from that. So in fact, but of course those were already 10 years out of date. So the books I bought in the 80s were the books from the 70s. And then the early 80s, I suppose I started getting more books because I was doing a lot of train travel. I was commuting to Newcastle. I should have been studying, but I read science fiction instead. The covers sold the books. If people saw a good cover, they would buy the book. So therefore, the publishers were willing to employ some of the top class sort of artists to design the covers.
Some of them are really, they're
Iconic.
abstract contemporary art.
Yeah, they're quite iconic, some of them, definitely. I love that it puts you in another world. You're completely separate from, completely different to what you're doing now, wherever you are. If you start reading a science fiction book and get into it, you're in a completely different place. Yes, you can get the same effect with other books, but I don't know, I find science fiction sort of more thrilling, more engrossing, and also I just love the new ideas, especially when they're imagining a completely different planet or something. So you've got a whole new plants, new biology, new ecology or whatever in that planet, and they make up the whole thing. A society, make up a complete society that doesn't exist now. And I just find that quite fascinating. Well, it wouldn't have occurred to me that sort of as a teenager that I could go and study literature just from my social background. I was always thinking more of a more applied way.
Your work has been engineering in your
Yes,
life.
yes.
It's been science.
Yeah, it's been science-based.
Do you see a connection between that and?
Yes, because
Science fiction.
the science fiction I really enjoyed was the ones that were pure science fiction. Now, Asimov, he always imagined his science, where he started talking about satellites, saying the geostationary orbits. He was the first person to think of that, really. And then the sky elevator, where one has immensely strong cables that go up to a satellite above the Earth orbit, and you can then send supplies up and down without a rocket. That will happen probably, maybe this century, but definitely by next century. Your children could see that, or your children's children will see it.
So it really is like speculative science fiction.
That's what appeals to me, yes.
Yeah. Some of the books you've got from the 50s, they were really populist. They were really like.
Oh yeah, they were
pulp fiction.
They were basically cowboy stories, but changed into science fiction. Shoot 'em up, the aliens coming in just like the Indians, etc., etc.
So there's a sort of, if you were going to do a post-colonial analysis of these things, they wouldn't come off that well, would they? Because the alien is the other.
No, they were just pulp fiction, let's be honest. Because it was popular in the States in the 50s and 60s. A lot of books were published. Many of them should never have been published in the first place. To be honest, the early science fiction was all men, and it was all male-dominated. And I think the first women actually published as men, just to get it published. Some of it was superb, McCaffrey, or some of the others. Because in fact, a lot of the editors were well-established science fiction writers. So you had to get past their prejudice to get your book printed. And it was a very competitive industry.
Yeah.
The magazines also, in America, the sci-fi magazines, very much determined the success of a book. And those were, I think, essentially misogynistic, and were anti-anybody except white males, really.
Yeah. And then that's going to shape what stories are published, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And who's imagining that future? Here's a good one. What does it mean to have a collection?
I don't know, it was an accidental collection, really. It wasn't a deliberate ploy that I would collect 1,500 books. It just ended up that many. So I just used to put them in a box after I'd read them, instead of sending them back to the charity shop.
We catalogued them.
Initially, yes, I catalogued the first 1,000 or so, yes. Which book, who published it, when it was published, and I had to cite out of mind.
Because they were
In the loft. In the end, put into fruit boxes and put in the loft. That's how I ended up with 2,000 books worth by accident.